Things are getting heated between the Argentinian government and the farmers who continue to hoard this year's soybean produce. An economic crisis has hit the country, while Argentinian farmers insist on storing their soybean harvest in silo bags. All farmers are showing a united front here, and they're adamant that this is the only way to protect themselves against the ongoing economic crisis in the country. Let's get right into it. First, let's take a look at the ongoing economic crisis in Argentina. 2022 hasn't been an easy year, and so many countries are facing plenty of economic issues. And well, Argentina's knee-deep in its share of troubles brought along by the ongoing economic crisis in the country. Just recently, inflation in Argentina climbed as high as 70%, and analysts believe this number's only going to get higher. It might even reach 90% by the end of this year. It's no secret that both inflation and economic instability are the public's biggest enemies in these difficult times. In just 6 weeks, we've seen Argentina go through 3 different ministers of economy, and all have tried their best to rein in the rampant inflation. Sergio Massa, the newest minister, promised his people on Wednesday that he's going to stop printing so much money. For those of you well versed in economics, printing more money only fuels inflation instead of stopping it, so that wasn't a good strategy in the first place. The country's experiencing a massive fiscal deficit, while its dollar reserves at the central bank keep dwindling. A new plan developed by Massa includes boosting the country's exports, reducing the fiscal deficit, and increasing dollar reserves. We hope Argentina comes out of this economic crisis in time. And then we have Argentinian farmers hoarding their soybean produce. Amidst all this turbulence, we've got Argentinian farmers in a standoff with the government. Walter Malfado, a 59-year-old farmer living in Buenos Aires, owns 700 hectares of farmland. Talking to Al Jazeera, he admitted how he's storing his soybean harvest in silo bags this year, and for him, it's basically protection against the devaluing Argentine peso. As the economic situation in Argentina remains unpredictable, the country's president is pointing fingers at the farmers for exacerbating an already uncertain and bleak situation. President Alberto Fernandez has refuted the claims that there's going to be a currency devaluation in the future. In an attempt to cushion the country from the effects of the economic crisis, the government's looking to increase its exports. This way, more US dollars will come in and increase the reserves at the central bank, and it'd also cover up the cost of importing natural gas. And what's the one big export item here? You guessed it right, it's soybeans. But with farmers keeping the harvest to themselves, it's turned into an incredibly messy situation. Up next, the country's bi-monetary system and the exchange rate gap. One of the biggest challenges for Argentina's economy is its bi-monetary system. The South American nation functions on 2 currencies, the Argentine peso and the US dollar. Because Argentina is facing an incredible local crisis these days, it's affecting its own local currency so much that the peso is depreciating. Because all the country's exports and imports are carried out in US dollars, the price for this keeps going up. What's more is that Argentina's got several exchange rates. We've got their official exchange rate, which is governed by the central bank, and then there are a couple of parallel exchange rates. One of these parallel rates includes the dollar blue. It's the term used by people to refer to the street-level exchange rate. Right now, the official rate is 133 pesos for $1, while the dollar blue sits at 295 pesos per dollar. You can see the staggering difference between these two numbers. This widened gap between the 2 exchange rates is an indication that the economy isn't doing too well at the moment. One Argentinian farmer, Hector Criado, who owns fields in the country's southern province of Chubut, described the difficulties these 2 rates bring for grain farmers. He talked about how farmers usually sell their harvest at an exchange rate that has a massive difference from the dollar blue, and this only brings in losses for the farmers. And when the time comes for these farmers to buy stuff for their farms, they have to pay the dollar blue rate. You can see how precarious that is from a financial standpoint. But why are the farmers engaging in this standoff against the Argentinian government? With that said, let's dive into what's the reason behind these farmers engaging in such a standoff, especially during such tough times. Vianjaregui Lorda, a farmer who raises cattle in Buenos Aires, spoke up about how the current situation isn't something that's happening for the first time. It's nothing new, and it's happened before. It's how farmers go about their business. The truth is, agricultural producers sell their harvests so that they can readily afford fuel, fertilizer, and seeds. If there's been a good yield that year, the producer will save up what's left over once he's bought the supplies he needs. This way, he ends up saving the leftover harvest in silo bags because that's his currency exchange. exchange. It's as simple as that. Some people buy dollars while the agricultural sector in Argentina stores up its harvest. It's a sort of safety net. With how the two exchange rates are currently fluctuating, of course, these farmers don't want to sell their harvest because it would cost them too much. Malfado claims that if the president switches to just one exchange rate, he and the rest of the producers will easily sell their harvest the very next day. Well, the country happens to be one of the world's leading agribusiness exporters. A quarter of Argentina's exports comprise agricultural exports. Judging by that, you can see how heavily the South American nation's economy relies on its agricultural sector. Some of the main agricultural products include soybeans, corn, wheat, meat, wool, and wine. Soybeans weren't a part of Argentina's agricultural landscape 30 years ago, but now they're essentially the main crop. It's their #1 export product, averaging around 36% of the total exports. With all that in mind, you'll understand then why this current situation is proving to be incredibly worrisome. Even though farmers have had a really good soybean harvest this year, they've sold 9% less compared to last year. Last year, they managed to sell around 26.7 million tons, whereas this year, they've sold just 21.5 million tons. It's the lowest they've sold in almost 17 years. That's even more alarming in light of the current economic crisis. Now, in other related news, Bangladesh turns to Russia for help with its own economic crisis. Right now, officials from the Bangladeshi government are arranging for meetings with the Russian oil company Rosneft. The latter offered Bangladesh refined fuel at a price of $59 per barrel. Due to its ongoing economic crisis and the decreasing national reserves, Bangladesh is trying its best to bring back economic stability to its landscape. The country's faced a lot of hikes in oil prices in the last few months, and it's only made the situation worse. Bangladesh has been buying oil from West Asian countries for $100 per barrel, but with the current situation, this deal with Rosneft seems to be the better option. How Sri Lanka's economic crisis is affecting the children in the country. We've got another country struck by a terrible economic crisis. A recent UNICEF report reveals how children in Sri Lanka have been going to bed hungry due to the scarcity in the supply of food. The ongoing economic crisis has left Sri Lankans in a state of despair. The hardest hit are those who now have to even skip regular meals because they're unable to afford any kind of kitchen staples. George Laria Ajay, South Asia's director for UNICEF, warned that what he's witnessed in Sri Lanka should serve as a warning for other South Asian nations. All this inflation and economic stability pose great dangers to the lives of children who now have no idea where their next meal is going to come from. In light of this, UNICEF has made an appeal for $25 million so they can meet the needs of half of the country's child population. And finally, how Europe's energy crisis could have a global impact. According to YouTuber Lark Davis, Europe's headed towards its economic death. The recent energy crisis in Europe is sure to have a huge global impact, and as a consequence, inflation's only going to get worse. Since the beginning of 2022, the prices for natural gas in Europe have increased fourfold. There's also been an increase in demand for fuel as lockdown restrictions were eased. The biggest factor driving this hike is fuel prices in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. Europe's seen a pretty hard summer this year, what with the record-breaking heat waves and increased temperatures brought on by climate change. All of this led to an increased demand for energy, even though the EU ordered a reduction in gas demand by 15% between the 1st of August 2022 and the 21st of March 2023. With the current situation, prices seem to keep soaring. That's a wrap for this video. Want to hear more about the ongoing global economic crises? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.